Hello, anatomy students. Today we are talking about the thoracic cage. This is part 3, the final part of the video lectures for our axial skeleton bone lab. So our thoracic cage is the rib cage, which you can see here, and it consists of the sternum, the ribs, and the costal cartilage, which is what attaches the ribs to the sternum itself. So let's first talk about the sternum. The sternum is a flat bone. It lies in the middle of the chest. Beneath it, we have the mediastinum with the heart and other associated blood vessels and glands. It's got the shape of a dagger. And the very top portion of the dagger, the handle, the part where you would hold it, this is called the manubrium. The root manu means hand, so that's where you would hold the dagger with your hand. So this is the manubrium of the sternum. The flat portion, the blade, is called the body of the sternum, and the very tip of the dagger is the xiphoid process. This is the part that you have to be careful of when you're doing chest compressions, when you're doing CPR, for those of you who have taken a CPR class, because if you put pressure too low on the sternum, you can cause this portion of the bone to chip off, and it can cause damage to the organs that lie underneath. So that's the sternum. Now, you'll notice that the ribs are attached to the sternum by what is represented as this clear plastic. This is representative of the costal cartilage. So that's costal cartilage. So it doesn't just go from bone to bone. You've got the cartilage here, and that is going to allow for our thoracic cage to be able to expand and then come back to its original shape during breathing, or, again, I can say during compressions when you're doing CPR. So it is going to allow for some flexibility there. But by looking at the costal cartilage, we can classify the ribs as one of 3 types. They are either true ribs or they are false ribs. And then we have 2 ribs, which are false ribs, and they're considered floating ribs. So let's consider these classifications. On each side of the sternum, you have 12 ribs. And the other 2 are down here at the bottom. So 12 ribs on each side. Rib number 1, it may interest you to know, is all the way up here, and it passes underneath this bone, which is the clavicle. And by costal cartilage, rib number 1 attaches to the manubrium of our sternum. In fact, the first 7 ribs are considered true ribs because they all attach to the sternum by their own pieces of costal cartilage. So here we have rib number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here's rib number 6, and then here's rib number 7. So 1 through 7 are called true ribs because they attach to the sternum via their own costal cartilage. Now, ribs 8 through 12 are considered false ribs. And the reason why they're considered false ribs is because they, although they have some costal cartilage, it merges with the costal cartilage from rib number 7. So ribs number 8, 9, and 10 are called false ribs because they don't have their own costal cartilage attachment to the sternum. It merges with the costal cartilage of rib number 7. So 8, 9, and 10, here's the side view, are considered false ribs. Now, ribs 11 and 12, so here is rib 11, and here is rib 12. Now, rib 11 and 12 are also false ribs, but they have another classification. Notice, and just here's the arm, notice that ribs 11 and 12 don't have a costal cartilage connection to the sternum at all. So we can also call them floating ribs. So ribs 11 and 12 are false ribs, but they are also floating ribs. Okay, and we can probably get another look at those from this angle here. And so here is rib number 12. You can see there's no costal cartilage, and then here's rib number 11. Again, no costal cartilage. So these two are false ribs, but they are also floating ribs. Okay, so if we take a look then at this piece of our thoracic cage, we are looking again at our sternum, and the top portion, once again, is the manubrium. The middle portion is called the body, and then the xiphoid process is the tip at the end. And then all of this clear portion, this is all representing the costal cartilage. All right. Now, let's take a look at the parts of the rib. So you'll notice that the rib is very curved on one side, and it straightens out a little bit on the other end. The part that is very curved, this part here, is the vertebral end. This is the portion of the rib that articulates with the thoracic vertebrae. On this end of our rib, we have the head, the neck, and this bump is called the tubercle. So the head and the tubercle are where this rib is going to articulate with the bottom portion of one thoracic vertebrae and the top portion of the one below it. And I'll show you another shot of that in just a moment. So once again, this is the very curved portion is the vertebral end of the rib. Here we have the head, the neck, and the tubercle. The other portion, the other side of our rib, has a much smoother, more blunt end to it. And this is where the rib articulates with the costal cartilage. We call this end of the rib the chondral or the costal end, chondral or costal end, because this is where it articulates with the costal cartilage. Okay, and so I know that I showed you a little bit of this in part 2 when we talked about the vertebral column, but I'm going to zoom in so that we are looking at this articulation right here so that we can see how the vertebrae and the ribs come together. All right, so you can see that the rib is going to articulate with two different thoracic vertebrae, one above it and one below it. This portion here where we have the transverse process articulating with the rib, this is articulating with the tubercle of the rib, and then the head is articulating with the other vertebrae. It's going to articulate with the inferior costal facet of that vertebrae. So the ribs are kind of coming in between two bones of the vertebral column. Okay, that's all that I have for you. This is a nice short video. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope it's useful for you, and I hope that you learned a lot. See you in class.